Hi, welcome back to Angel's Nook, and welcome for the first time if this is your first visit here. You're going to go on a journey in this video, with quite a lengthy journey, with this wonderful rocking chair from 1900 that I'm now sitting here savoring that it is completed and we can enjoy it now for many years to come. But originally it was headed for the trash pile. The reason this video is so long is there are an awful lot of techniques that went into fixing this. I know most people are not going to sit here and watch the entire thing, but if you are someone who needs to know how to strip chemically to get paint off, how to do it safely, if you're someone who needs to know how to use the carbide scrapers, especially on intricate things, not just the flat top of a dresser that you see in a lot of videos or down the side or across a drawer, this video is the video for you. If you need to see how to bleach wood, it's in this video. If you need to understand how and when to use wood conditioner before staining, this video is for you. How to stain over raw wood. How to use lacquer as a finish, which is what is on this, which has given it that gorgeous, lustrous, like it's been waxed for years by a butler, finish. That's in this video. So use the chapters. Go to things you actually need. If you're feeling adventurous and a little nerdy and you want to see the whole process of taking this rocker, which was absolutely destined for the trash heap because it had so much damage and so much paint glopped all over it, join in the fun with this. Also, we're adding something on this particular video that we thought some people could have fun with, because we certainly looked at each other and said, how on earth did this happen in the middle of redoing, reconstructing, putting together this rocker? We did something that we've never quite done before and went, oh my gosh, I can't believe we did that. So if you find what in effect is kind of like an Easter egg in this video and you are a subscriber, the first person who identifies it comments to us and then provides us with a screenshot that shows you actually are a subscriber to us, because we can't see the entire list of our subscribers. We will send to you this set that I did earlier in the year. Let's see if I can turn it. Yeah, I do have it turned the right way. Of two small lanterns that are done in a light driftwood faux finish. They're metal, but they're done in the faux wood finish. We're also attaching the video for how this was done as well. So come along and join the fun with this, because this was an adventure that I had no idea the twists and turns it was going to take us on to be able to make this beauty come back to life. This was one of my crazier purchases. I saw it on Marketplace, a woman had it listed, and the photos didn't show as much damage as there is on this when I went to actually see it. This piece in the center here will actually slide completely out. It had been in her family from the time it was purchased by her great-great-uncle in 1900. It had been in the family the entire time. But obviously it's had a really hard life. This piece here has been wrapped with wire to hold it in place. There's other pieces where there's a piece in the bottom here that is broken. You can see this is broken, but I have found a gentleman who is going to be able to create a new one of these for me on his lathe, but I have to get one of these spindles stripped to give to him. The reason that I just felt like this was a piece that I really wanted to try to save is I had never seen the type of pressed imprint that's on the top of this. I don't know how easily you can see it, but it has a lion head on it. And that's something, though I've looked at antiques since I was a small child going with my father to purchase them for clients, I had never seen that particular pattern. And some of the other lines on here, there's another lion head down here on the backrest. So I'm anxious to see how this looks when it's stripped, because I'm hoping that they didn't take any finish off of it and that I'm not going to have a lot of paint that's gotten down into the wood. If the finish was intact in the original, I should be able to save this chair and have a lot of options with it. So this is going to be a bit of a bear to strip, but I think it's going to be worth it in the long run, and I think this gentleman has a life ahead of him still, and probably going to be a life that's in our house, not somewhere else. This is probably going to be a really tedious process, stripping this paint off of here. My preferred products are Clean Stripper as the stripper, and then the same brand's Afterwash, which what it will do is it will neutralize and clean off the residue after you've gotten the bulk of the residue off. You can even use it in between. You can use this to clean part of it, realize you've still got paint on there, and use more stripper. I want something that's going to strip fast and is not going to soak into my wood for long periods of time, especially on something that is this old and this fragile. I don't know if you are aware, but these designs that are in the back of older oak chairs and cabinets and whatnot as decorative pieces, they were not carved. A gentleman invented a method of making intricate designs and pushing or pressing into the wood with a metal mold that would create these shapes. And how the mold was made is how you get the nice curves and all that is in here. But that's why it's called a pressed wood design. As old as this is, there is no way to sand this. There wouldn't have been any way to sand this to get this paint finish off, because in the process you would start sanding down the beautiful pressed design that is in here. So what I'm going to be using is several different things. I'm not sure what all I'm going to need to start with, but the things I always have handy: a brush to brush it on with, an old toothbrush. It's softer. I avoid metal at all costs because you can make gouges and scrapes that you don't intend to. So the scraper that I have is literally a plastic one for cleaning pots. This sometimes is really good for getting the bulk of paint to start moving off. And the green scrubby is really helpful with stripper as well as other things. So I don't know how long it's going to take this to activate. This stripper is slightly thick. A little bit that we did on a piece of the seat, it was coming off nicely, and there's going to be areas where that they painted over dried raw wood, but it looked like the finish itself in most of the area was left in place. And you can see it's already started to work through the polyurethane that they glopped on the top of this. Not sure why. They really threw it on heavy like they were doing a antiquing with it, but it's not an antiquing gel that was put over this. You can see some of the original finish there, where that they did not paint the underside of this backrest, which is going to make my life a lot easier here. You want to wear old clothes and you want to wear heavy gloves like this for cleaning or dishwashing, the newer latex gloves that are out cannot hold up to stripper. And you really don't want that all over your hands. Gonna let it sit. So it's gonna take a little while. Here I can see it's starting to bubble a little bit. So it says 20 minutes, and sometimes the 20 minutes is your happy mark, and sometimes it isn't. On some finishes, I've had to go ahead and start working as soon as it started bubbling up because it was that easy to get off. But this one's going to take a bit to get it to start blistering up the paint. So we're going to turn off the cameras, let this go until it's ready to start lifting. This is set for a little over 10 minutes. So basically it was just checking it to see is it ready to release. And I tried the straight scraper, but this is going to get into the grooves better. So it looks like we have multiple layers of paint here. Looks like somebody did a brown paint job under this, over the stain as well. Work slow, you've got to put pressure, but you don't want to be swiping back and forth on this hard because you will toss pieces of the paint and the stripper onto you. And that is no fun because it burns. And now it's going to be adding another coat of this. You want to be in a well-ventilated space, and you really don't want to hang out with it during the 10 minutes. 10 to 20 minutes, it depends on what your finish is, so just check it. And if it needs more time, just walk away from it again. If this starts drying to the surface, add more on there before you walk away so it's good and wet. Again, walk away from it. Let it sit for another 10 minutes or so. Come back. I have switched to the old toothbrush, and you can see that some of the finish is coming off with that. The old toothbrush allows you to scour without scouring the wood and making gouges in it, because the wood is now getting wet from the stripper, and harder bristles or metal scrapers would start making gouges in this. This must have been an old oil-based paint. It's another reason I don't want to sand at this point, because I do not know what the paint is. The paint right now is captured in the chemical process of the stripper, so I'm not breathing it. Got gloves on, so it's not able to go into my skin. As soon as we get this one finished showing you on close-up cameras, we're going to be going out to the garage where there is much better ventilation, because you don't want to do this indoors in a closed room or space. The fumes are not good for you to breathe. As much of the gunk as I can out of the toothbrush, so it's still got bristles to use to work. Use the wash to see how much of this is off. Oh wow, there's a lot more detail into that lion head than you could see before. There's teeny tiny fine grooves in this that are creating the full flow of the lion mane. It's really beautiful. The details to begin with were pretty, but this is really showing more. I'm going to let this dry so that you can see how far this is gone and how much is left on it, because it's pretty much down to the wood. But because the wood's wet, that's going to be hard for you to see. So we're going to let it dry and come back. There will be still more that needs to be done to it for stripping, but you'll be able to see where it is at this point. I'm going to give it a go with a nail brush once I get my gloves back on. Actually, it's just a scrub brush. Getting close to getting through it all because it dried onto the top in a short period of time, which means it was getting into the wood. So we'll see if reactivating it and using the brush gets me the rest of the way with this. And while I'm sure some people would say I should just wrap it with citrus strip, I have never had success with citrus strip. So I'm just going to patiently work with this. More of it is coming off. Try to wash. This is just sludge, almost like tar. I'm going to let it dry completely and see what a light sand does with it tomorrow. This is a sharp chisel, but it's small, and I'm going to be doing a very, very light touch to try to lift, and you can see that piece of paint came right out. So I'm not gouging the wood at all. I'm grabbing the pieces of paint to pull them out because it appears that some of this there was no finish on, which allowed the paint to get farther into the wood. I'm not even touching as hard with this, not even close, as I did with the plastic pot scrubber. But any little pieces of paint that are left will show through stain and look bad. This is definitely tedious, but the reward will be being able to see all these details again and seeing it as it may have much closer to how it would have looked when it was first made. What's rolling up is not the wood, it's the finish. The remainders of the finish that's still on this wood.
Close.
This looks like it's going to need one more run of the stripper on it, and I dislike using metal, but this gave me no choice because of where the paint had been pushed into, which means a very light touch, and it means being super, super patient with what you're doing, or you have a big gouge out and no way to fix it because there's no way to use wood putty to fill in and repair a design like this. So it's going to get another soak, and hopefully that will do it for it. Now you can start to see, even with the stripper on here, you can start to see the grain. So we're going to leave this soak for a while, come back to it. They keep changing strippers to make them more eco-friendly, which is a good thing, but it certainly does make it difficult to get old finishes off. So this particular stripper, Saran wrap starts to break down with it. Citrus strip doesn't touch this, so that wasn't an option for those of you who like citrus strip. So now we've tried wrapping it tightly with foil. And it looks like this is going to do the trick. to make this easier to get this off. You can see there where that was sitting on the bottom, where it pooled. And even down here where I've been having trouble getting off pieces. This is going to make stripping the rest of this rocker an awful lot easier. I'm not bearing down with the paint scraper. The lines you're seeing are not pieces of wood coming off. That's some of the old finish that's still on there. But when I clean it up with the wash, most of those will go away, and then the hand sanding on this will also clear it up. But now this is just letting me bump over it to get this out. I will have to use a little chisel to get down into those seams so I can get the rest of that paint off. This is making me happy because this rocker had turned into a nightmare, and now it's back to, okay, this is doable. We can live with this. This paper towel is soaked with afterwash. This is not by any means completely stripped yet, but using the afterwash at this point lets me get a lot of that residue off so that this can be wrapped again in the stripper, and the rest of it will come out of all of these crevices. I'll still need to use the small chisel to get in there, and I have no idea what these white paint was that got in here in different places, but it is literally like concrete. But it's not some type of wood filler, it's definitely paint. So it becomes figuring out how to get that off, and your tools will wash with soap and water. What I'm going to be showing you, most of the time the camera is going to have the sound pulled off on this because the sound is so incredibly loud using the scraper. But I want you to see the directions that you have to go, and that you can use the scraper to get the paint off of designs like this. It's scary. You think you're going to be ripping the wood off, and you are not. You are taking the paint off with the Carbide scraper. So when you're doing the scraping, you've got to use a firm puller. And on the straightaways like this, it's easy. But when you have areas where I've already worked here some, where the curve comes down like this, you can't use the scraper this way. You have to turn the piece around, and when you pull into it, and some areas of paint are crankier than others. But you can see it gets down to that edge. Then what you can do is you're going to take the Carbide scraper over this, and this is where you're going to think, oh my gosh, I'm just going to ruin that spindle. You're not. But I need to turn this way because it's easier to hold this way. You're going to pull really hard. And you can see it gets a lot of it off. But when you turn it the other way, you start to get more of the paint off than you did the first direction. And by turning it back and forth, you're maintaining, following the grain. You don't want to go across it this way. You don't want to get a gouge in here. Days of work have gone into this already. Getting all of the finish off, primarily scraping, using some files, using some razor blades to get down into grooves where that it went deep into the grain of different parts. Normally, I tell you, do not use liquid deglosser on raw wood because it will raise the grain. In the case of this old rocker, we still have a lot of finish sanding to do on it, but before I even stain it or do any of the finish sanding before staining, this is going to also be put through oxalic acid to get it bleached out as much as possible and get the dark spots out of the old wood as much as possible. So it doesn't matter that I am using the liquid deglosser this time because I know this is going to get very wet with the oxalic acid, so I'm going to have sanding to do no matter what. But these, even though they've been wiped down from the sanding, there's still so much crud on them that if I tried to get this clean with just the wipes, I would be wasting wipes because I'd go through a couple of cans of the wipes just getting this clean. So what I've done is I have poured some deglosser off into a bowl because I know it's going to get messy. And also, one of the things I tell you not to do normally is don't fill with your wood putty. But we know, having already worked on pieces of this, that we're going to have to refill again an additional layer of wood putty before this is ready to be finished. So if I lose a little bit of wood putty in this level, it's okay because we needed that wood putty down deep into the cracks and crevices. This particular side piece really had major cracks, and because of that, it was next to impossible without breaking these to remove the old screws that had been put in there. So we're just going to camouflage it with some stain and consider it part of the character of this piece that's never going to be perfect anyway because of the hard life it's had. So when you're using the liquid deglosser and a green scrubby, just dip it in and scrub. It holds plenty. You can see it's sudsing up. I don't have to paint this on with a brush and let it sit. I'm twisting because the green scrubby is not going to damage the grain, but I need to get into all of those grooves in this. This is very dry wood, so it's taking in the deglosser, which is another reason why I want to not piddle around with it. Oh, I missed the top of this. There's still some places, as I'm working with it, there's some places that as I'm getting it clean, I can see still need to have some of the blue gotten off of it. But for the most part, because I worked fast and I didn't soak that wood putty, it's going to stay in pretty well. But it still needed another coat anyway, so it's fine. And you can see how much came off on this, but with the paper towel being absorbent, it pulled all that excess off. And I'm also going to show you on a seat piece here where we've already done some significant wood fill on this, where it was just really popped open. And parts of this, the graining here is some of the places that I had to use the edge of a razor blade to pull out the blue that got down in the green because it was so open when they put all the blue paint on it. But you can see how pretty the green is going to be on this too, once this is repaired and put back together. I did not leave that on the front side before wiping it back because it would have just soaked into this. This is the bottom of the seat, but I want it clean too because I'm going to put finish on it this time to help it hold up better. You can see the roughness of the wood there because we haven't gotten around to sanding that down yet either. And the last thing I'm going to do are the edges. There's some glue in here, but it really doesn't matter because this is a glue joint. It's never going to be seen. And this is what's going to happen to all the rest of the pieces of this. Then it'll be allowed to get some dry to it, and then it'll have the oxalic acid put on it to bleach it, which is how you bleach wood. All of the pieces to the rocking chair have been deglossed and are pretty much dry. If you look at these, and this happens often when you strip wood or just older pieces of wood, there's dark stain-like areas on here, which you can really see on the back of the top, the lights and the darks. So one of the ways to get rid of that, also, on the front, you can see how this has a different tone than this. The front pieces that were pressed wood, that had the design pressed in, I had to use stripper on. And when I used stripper, I got a darker tone, and that's normal. When you strip something off, you get that on virtually anything. You get a slight discoloration from the chemical breakdown of the paint. So by adding oxalic acid, which is easy to find in the paint aisle in hardware stores, you can mix up a large amount of it or you can mix up small amounts of it. I'm going to mix up just a quart of it because that's all I need. And for a quart, it's basically a heaping tablespoon into very hot water. You don't want boiling water, you want hot water. This is something you want to wear gloves with. I wear gloves with deglosser simply because it dries out my skin. It's not harmful to get it on your skin, but it's just drying for many people. The oxalic acid, you do not want it on your skin. So I've mixed that up. It still looks like a clear liquid, but that bleach agent is in there. And you never, ever, ever want to mix oxalic acid and add regular laundry bleach to it. Don't ever do that. You're going to get a very dangerous gas situation that's not healthy for you. But this, there's no smell to it. I'm using a chip brush, and I really want to get this good and wet. Ideally, you would be setting this out into sun because the sunlight would help the reaction on this. I don't have that. We're in Florida, but we're experiencing winter right now too, so we're not getting good, bright, warm, sunny days. So once I've got this good and wet, behind here I have 5-gallon buckets. Oops, I missed a spot. That I'm just setting them upright into. I'm gonna do the same thing onto this. I only deglossed once. I could feel the squeaky. Even as dirty as you saw my paper towels, I could get the squeak across the surface. You're not wiping this off at all for the oxalic acid. You're letting it soak into the wood. And this, as wet as you can see I'm getting this, is exactly why I just went ahead and used liquid deglosser to clean this. There's a very faint odor to this, but nothing, I mean, you really have to be right against it to smell it. Once you have all the pieces wet, really good and wet, and I'm not going to go back and wet them again, it's just this first time getting it good and wet, then you're going to let it sit for 30 minutes, and then you're literally going to hose it down to get rid of the oxalic acid off of it. And you'll actually see a powdery buildup on it once it starts to dry in the 30 minutes. So you want to get all of that off. I'm going to be doing that inside in our shower. I'm going to be hosing it off with a shower head because it's too chilly outside to have our hoses going, and we actually have them off for the winter. So that's how I'm going to rinse these off, and I'll show you what it looks like once we've gotten through that process and it's dried overnight. Okay, before I turn the water on, I just want you to see that you're going to have to give it a really good drenching to get the oxalic acid off. And you're really not going to see a big change until it's fully dry. And it's possible if we can get some sunshine tomorrow, I may put another coat on it and put it outside. I'm just going to wait and see what it looks like when it's actually dry. It won't completely eradicate the dark spots, but it will lighten them. This has dried overnight from having the oxalic acid taken off of it, and we have places all over that we have to add more wood fill. A little of it came out, not a lot, but that's an expectation. If you get wood putty that has not been sealed with shellac wet, some of it's going to come out. We have some cracks that have to be filled better. Some of these screws are inset down, and those will be filled with wood putty just to hide them. But we have that work to do all over this, and we also have to sand the whole thing. It's probably really hard to see, but this is significantly lighter than it was, and so is this side of this. So I'm not as concerned about this being a little bit darker because I want the stain to go in heavier in all of the grooves so that these designs come out on this. And even though there's dark spots on here, during the sanding process, it's lightening, and it did on some of these places that I worked on off camera to see how well it was going to do. Those are also lightening. So this is all going to, after the wood putty has been put in, the DAP plastic wood to fill all the spots, we'll be checking all of that. Then this will get sanded with 220 and then 320 grit sandpaper off camera. And that's one of the steps you don't want to go slack on because it makes a huge difference in the finish that you wind up with when you've had to strip something completely down to redo it. The clamps need to remain on this to give the hide glue time to fully dry for at least 12 hours. But it's been drying for about 5 hours now, so now these spots, the cracks and all that are here in the front, off camera I'm going to be filling that with wood putty. We're going to be turning the seat upside down and filling extra hide glue on the bottom and doing some wood fill underneath right back here where there's a gap missing. But that's the next step with this. The chair has been put completely back together. It's all glued. Everything has been checked on it. I've done one last check over the entire thing that there are no places that need additional sanding or additional wood fill. Take the time to do that. It doesn't really take very much time to run your hand over all the edges, feel down everything, feel especially edges like this that can have sharp splinteriness if they have had, if it's an old piece of wood, and even if it's a new piece. There's an awful lot of wood fill that had to be done on this seat because of how badly it was splintered. That's going to require some additional work to camouflage that when I get to the stain step. This is a solid oak rocker from 1900. Usually I don't use any wood conditioner on a hardwood because the stain will go evenly on it. But this piece has had such a rough history. It was left out with water damage and whatnot. That can cause the stain not to go evenly. I also have these two areas that I chemically stripped, and the rest of the chair was stripped using the Carbide scrapers. So this pieces and these could take stain differently because of the treatment that's been used on them. But there was no way to do anything but chemical stripping on these two pieces, and they came out beautifully. So what I'm going to be putting on this is what is called a wood conditioner, or a lot of times it says pre-stain wood conditioner. Even if you're doing a water wash on raw wood, this could be a good thing to use. But you have to make sure on a wood conditioner that you're getting the one for the type of finish you're putting over it. If you're putting an oil-based product onto your wood after using the wood conditioner, you have to use the one that's made for oil-based. If you're doing a wash or a water-based stain and dye onto the wood, you've got to use the one that is water-based, and it's a little bit harder to find. But you can't use the wood conditioner and that's for oil and then put water-based products over it. It does not work. It will repel it. The other thing is, once you've put the wood conditioner on, you have a window that you have to start staining. You can start staining as soon as 30 minutes after you have applied it, but you have a maximum at 2 hours. Beyond 2 hours, your wood conditioner has lost its effect to create the stain going smoothly. So you absolutely can't put the wood conditioner on one day and stain the next and go, well, it's still blotchy, the wood conditioner didn't help. It can't help. It has a window of time that it works, and you have to abide by that. So if you're planning on staining after the wood conditioner, you have to set aside enough time to get both steps done. You can't go run errands and come back. You'll have a disaster on your hand. And it's not going to work to keep reapplying the wood conditioner either. So that's the next step that's going to happen on this, but I also wanted to show you the back posts. These support posts were drilled all the way through, the holes for them were. So in order to get a good amount of the hide glue in there to really hold them, before we glued them in, we put heavy duct tape over the bottom of the holes so that the glue was in here, and it needs some air to completely dry now. So I'm going to wait for a little bit, let this dry for a little bit before I do the wood conditioner, because I want to do the wood conditioner on the top, the bottom, and this entire piece. If I had thought about it last night, I would have taken this tape off earlier. But this created a dam so that the hide glue would not just run through to the floor. One of the really great things, and I just got some on right there that I'll clean up, about the hide glue is that it's very easy to remove it. With hot water and a cloth, or hot water and a paper towel, it comes right off, and yet the glued joints, that hide glue will hold for its estimated over 1,000 years, which is why it is still used today in restoration and in crafted furniture, high-end crafted furniture, because it allows you to take it apart, do repairs, put it back together, and yet it is so sturdy in between. So I'm going to let this dry for a little while, and then I'm going to show you the steps for applying the wood conditioner. You definitely want to work in a well-ventilated area. This has definitely an odor to it. It's not the same as oil paint, but it's it's definitely a solvent smell to it that's a little different of the oil stain rather. I've turned this upside down off camera to start to get all of the bottom pieces. Where this is light, you can see I have not gotten the wood conditioner on it yet. So, but I got the other sides of the pieces done. Apply it liberally. You don't have to have it running everywhere, but you definitely want to get the wood wet with it. Okay. The other thing is, with this, just like stain, you cannot apply it to the whole thing and then go back and wipe. So as you finish each segment, wipe them down. On these, the spindles, I basically just have to get the top because I got 3 sides while it was upside down. I can do 2 spindles at a time without a problem. You could use a cloth, but you can also use quality paper towels. You can't use the cheap brands of paper towels thinking, oh, well, I'm just going to use it for that and I'll throw them all away, so it's a waste to get good brand. If you get the cheap paper towels to do something like this, you wind up with them sticking and pieces tearing up. So it's not smart to do that. and I don't have a lot of towels and stuff to cut up and throw away. This is not staining the wood. It will lighten up, or would lighten up if you let it dry completely. It won't be dry completely when I start. It'll feel dry to the touch, but it won't be dry down in the wood when I start adding stain a half an hour after I finish applying all this. You need to think about where you're working because you're going to wind up with dribbles. The same thing's going to happen when I do stain. So I'm going to do the front of this, the front of the spindles, and the front of this piece. Then I'll go around and do the back of all of those, wipe them down, and then I'll start working in sections in the next. I'll go down these poles. I will start on the seat, get the seat all done. Then I will do the arms, the spindles, and I will do the front edge all the way around this band when I get the seat done. But that will allow me to clean up anything that comes down onto the seat. And I'll have to tip the chair so that I can get the wood conditioner underneath these arms. I did not do it while it was upside down because I want to be able to do the spindles at the same time I do that. And I didn't want conditioner just sitting on the seat that I would be applying a second coat to. This design, you're going to have to, or anything that has a similar type design, you're going to have to swirl the brush to get in there. Some people might have liked this chair just bare wood. I don't, so that's why I'm going the next steps, because I want to really clearly see the design in this chair, and hopefully you can see that just the wood conditioner on it is making it much more visible. And you can see I'm putting a decent amount on here. I'm not trying to stretch this, and I've probably used less than a quarter of this can right now. And it's fine. When I get to the bottom here, I'll do some going across the grain and with the grain, because you want to make sure the wood conditioner gets down into everything. I'm going to continue doing this till the entire chair is done, and then we'll come back when it's time to start staining. The wood conditioner I checked and tried on the bottom definitely does help to blend the wood putty, but you still see very clear spots of where it is. So I've got some of the areas on this that I had gone ahead and put stain on, like down here and here. The other thing that I have done with the HTP stain for this chair, HTP is as a full gel stain, the way it comes out of the can, is very much a topical stain. It doesn't seep deeply into anything. It sits on top. And just like dry skin, if you have super dry skin in the winter, you need a really good lotion that can get into your skin, not just something that wipes over the top and sits on the top of your skin. You need something that really moisturizes and feeds your skin to help it heal from the dry skin. With old wood, dry wood, that needs exactly the same thing. This has really taken a beating outside in the elements. It's not been taken care of, and so it needs a deep feed of oil. And by mixing the HTP stain 1-to-1 with mineral spirits, I've created a much thinner stain that acts like a penetrating traditional stain. It does have top coat in it, so it doesn't fully act in that way, but it will get down into this wood. It will soak into it, and so will the polyurethane that I will put over the top of this. And the reason I'll do that is when this dries, when the stain dries on here, because it's over raw wood, it's not going to have any sheen at all. It's going to completely go very flat looking, which is not what I want. So I'll be adding a satin polyurethane, not a polyacrylic. Polyacrylic can flake off, it can go cloudy over time. And again, with the polyurethane, that's going to seep into this wood and also give it more oil, more strength, more renewal to make it last longer. Sorry, the fumes in here have been really tough, and we can't keep everything wide open because it's 35 degrees here in Florida. Not supposed to be, but it is. So I'm going to continue working on this, but first what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some color into these spots where there is where I have put wood putty, and then I'm going to let that dry. I'm going to come up and work on this, and by the time I get back down to here, I'll be able to put a coat of finish on it. And I'm debating which way is going to work best with this. Usually when I'm doing this, I will use straight stain, but I'm going to see which way it works better. I may have to do a little bit of the straight stain and a little bit of, I think from how that's feeling, that's what I will do. That I will dip into the mix of stain that I have diluted with mineral spirits. And for those of you that are going to say, oh my gosh, you can't do that. Yeah, you can. The can even tells you can dilute the stain, especially over raw wood. So what I'm going to do is use the brush to try to create marks like this over this front. Because I want some lines in it, not straight color. There. Got enough loaded in the brush now. So it's not, for this piece, it's not completely the normal HTP. It's got a little bit of my dilute in it. And I'm going to come down here and do that on this. And I may actually even need to use some markers later to finish hiding that in. I've got a light spot on here where we got deeper into the wood sanding to make sure that this seat was smooth. So that I'm also going to pull the brush through. And you should be able to see that that is both darkening and creating streaks. I need a little bit more of the straight. You should be able to see that that softened down that seam where that there was some wood putty applied in it. You don't want to just go down just the seam. You want to get some stain down in there, but you want the lines to be all along it to help it hide. Oh, just while I'm thinking about it looking down, if you're working on a tarp on a floor, tape down the tarp so you don't fall. I don't bounce as well as I did when I was younger. So having the tarp taped down is a saving grace for me. And yes, I know I'm not blending this right now. I'm going back now, when the brush has less stain on it, to fix and blend out those lines. Yes, this takes more time. But it's worth it in the final result. I'm not trying for full coverage on that. This is a repair area. There's a ridge there, so I don't want to come up on that repair. I want to go down. Otherwise, you get a really heavy line. I have put with the regular stain and just a little bit of the mineral spirits to thin it just slightly. I have gone over all of the spots that have wood-putty repairs. And those all now need to dry. Whoops, there's one I'll get in just a minute. Those all need to dry before I stain the whole thing now with a coat of the mineral spirits mixture of the stain and the mineral spirits. Otherwise, all the work I've done to hide this putty will be washed off and lifted off with the mineral spirits, and I don't want that to happen. It would happen anyway if I put just a whole coat of HTP stain and wiped back. I'd have the same thing happen. But I've got this disguised enough right now that I want to leave it alone, let it dry to the touch, and then I will come out and put the thinned stain on with a cloth. I know a lot of people would say, well, just stop right there. You don't have to do anything else. But these lines show up too clearly to me. This white here does. These places right here. So I'm going to show you what I do to blend those in. And I've got two really small art brushes out. They are very, very small. They're for fine work, especially this one. And what I'm going to be doing is using just the gel stain straight out of the can, and I want to get a lot of it off my brush. I don't want it to be a big glob. And then what I'm going to do is in these spots, I'm very lightly going to touch this. I'm having to figure out right now exactly how much paint I need on my brush to get some lines in here, and I need more. and I rolled my brush to get a fine tip on it. So, very light wipe. You don't want to pull it out of the groove. If need be, you put a little bit more back in. The crack is not completely gone, but by the time the polyurethane is added to it, it will vanish in with the lines of the other instead of standing out like this. And over on this section, I've got this heavier spot that needs to be fixed. Sometimes pouncing pulls off the gel on a repair like this rather than swiping. This is Bill. Too much on my brush. And I'm going to work my way around this piece There's not tons of places. I've got this main piece here, a little bit of work on the front, and the spots on a couple of places on the back. And then this will be ready, and this area right up here has to be blended in. But hopefully you can see it's time consuming, it's a little tedious, but that side looks better than this side. It's going to need probably more blending even after I add the coat of this thinned stain over it. But you can see that the seat already looks pretty darn good. It's not completely done yet, and this front edge was always going to go darker. It's just a function of this type of wood. So now I'm going to use a cloth. It's so much easier to use a cloth to get into all the crannies on spindles. And one of the reasons I wanted this thinned as well is I don't want to completely cake up all the design on this. I want to stain it, but I don't want it just filled in heavy that when I try to wipe it off, I can't, that I've obliterated the design in there. So that's what I'm about to start doing, is to start applying this on here. I'm going to show you a piece of this. I'm going to do the seat, and then and one of the arms, and then I'll start working off camera to finish this. I did put the cloth, slid this and the brush into a plastic bag because I knew with this as dry as it was that within an hour I was going to be able to use it. But this cloth by tomorrow, if I needed to do a second coat, would have to be thrown away. The brush, if it wasn't cleaned, would have to be thrown away because they just don't, they dry and you can't clean them. But the chip brush itself can be cleaned with mineral spirits. It's not worth cleaning a rag out. The cloth is also allowing me to swirl into this to get into all the grooves. I went across the grain there because there was some fill area, but you always want your final strokes, however you're applying, to follow the grain. There are a couple of light spots that I will be coming back over with more stain once this layer of stain has dried. That's just one of the things that happens when you've had to do repairs. I've got a little bit of stain on these screws that are holding that piece together, but I will dry brush those screws with some straight gel stain before I start to polyurethane. Check all sides, make sure you're not leaving puddles of stain down on the bottom when you're doing spindles, because those will show after the stain dries. And have good light so you can see clearly that the stain has covered all of the surfaces. And I smoothed out the stain that got on there as I was going up and down, so I didn't have a big lap mark up here on this. By not overloading the cloth, I'm getting stain on here, but not having a lot of excess on it. The cloth is wet, but it's not drippy. Dries, I've got to check the back. That the back of all these spindles got stain on them. When I opened up my satin polyurethane, it was not in good condition. It had not held well. It seems like the newer cans that are super thin are not going as airtight as the old metal cans did. So when I went to get new polyurethane, I was happy to see on the shelf lacquer, which is actually what would have originally been on this chair. They might have done a layer of shellac, but then lacquer would have been the primary finish that's on there. This is not going to dry shiny. You think about lacquer, you think about fingernail polish, it's not going to dry shiny like that. You can get it shiny, but it's primarily a satin finish. And usually you have to find it at a special woodworking store, but our Lowe's happen to have it in stock by Minwax, and I know Minwax is an extremely quality product and has been for over 100 years. So that's what I'm going to be applying to this. I'm going to be putting it on the bottom. The reddish tint that you see on this chair is not the tobacco stain. Tobacco is not reddish like this. It is actually the color of the wood coming through the stain that's showing that tone. So I'm going to paint the bottom. I'm going to apply the lacquer to the bottom of this. It's always good for a piece to do the bottom and the top, do both sides of wood to help prevent cracking and drying out underneath. You know you've seen a really well-made piece of furniture when they have gone to that effort, and it doesn't take long to do it. It also allows you, with it upside down like this, to make sure you've got all of the inside pieces of this that would be really hard to see if you were trying to do it on the floor or even had this up on a table. It's easier to get into this sitting upside down than right side up. I'm going to go top down on this, putting the finish on, because it's going to be easier to keep track of. If I have any place that has a run that starts, I can catch it while this is still good and wet, because the lacquer dries really, really fast. So I want to catch any of that, and I can see it going down. If there's any drops, I can fix that in the seat without dulling a spot, fixing it after I've done the back. So I'm going to come top to bottom on this. To get in those grooves, I've got to run my sponge sideways, or it's just going over the top. Don't overload your sponge. you wind up with a bunch of runs. And actually, you can see I'm using it flat first before I go sideways to get excess off of it. Be in really good light because you will miss spots. You will with any top coat. You can see I went horizontally on that. I've got a little bit down here on the top of this, so I'm smoothing it. I don't want to let that start drying and build up. And as soon as I get these spindles done on the front and as much of the sides as I can do, I'm going to immediately go to the back and do the back side of them. The smooth parts of the spindles are relatively easy to get your finish on. But even on those where you need to, sometimes it's easier to get that finish to lay down on all of them and do a final smooth. Again, let the front of that, the tip of that sponge brush help you. I'm barely dipping into this finish. It's brushing more on this because my sponge got up and pushed in there and created a run. I saw a run starting there. I'm going to go ahead and grab that. When you're painting, when you're staining, when you're putting finish on, don't forget the underneath pieces, like where I just painted under here, because those need finish as well. for me, so I've got light across this, and I can see that I'm actually coating all of this. Because it's super, super easy. I can't emphasize it enough. Have light when you're putting top coat on. It's too easy to miss spots. The reason I pounce this sometimes is because this holds a lot of finish and it allows you to get some of that finish out without going back into the can. And sometimes you have little divots in the wood. That you need to be able to fill those in. Turning the sponge over can help too, because the pressure you're using to apply can push finish up into the other side. I'm looking to make sure I did not put that on heavy somewhere and create a run, and now I'm going to start from the bottom up on the post so that I can still hold on to the top. Lacquer can be recoated in 2 hours without any sanding. This is just a little over 2 hours because we went to get some lunch. I wanted you to see the tone of it right now, and off camera I'm going to go ahead and add additional coats. It normally is supposed to have, lacquer needs to have 3 to 5 coats. It's durable on something like this. It would not be your choice on a tabletop, like a kitchen table, the top of that. Polyurethane is more durable for that kind of hardware. It's also not used on floors for the same reason, wood floors. And in wood floors, you really want a pure urethane that's made for floors. But I wanted you to see the finished tonality of this. And off camera, I'm going to go ahead and put 2 more coats on here, and then you'll see the finished look. The can clearly says that you do not have to sand between coats with the lacquer like you do with polyurethane. But after 2 coats on here, I like the sheen to it, but you can feel what are called nibs in the finish. So I'm going to use a Scotch-Brite that is only used for sanding, and it doesn't take a lot. And it's nice and smooth and ready for the next coat. I don't think the next coat is going to need sanding, but if it does, I'll use this quickly in between. But it's giving a much smoother finish than, it's not bad, but it's enough roughness that it's not a finished finish the way it should be. So I'm going to continue to do that. I think the cool thing is that from the feel of this and how easy those nibs are sanding down, you could put multiple coats on before sanding. You wouldn't have to sand truly between each coat. And since it dries in 2 hours as far as being able to sand or recoat, that's not bad at all. So I'm liking how this is working. The final finish on this I'm really pleased with. I wanted to have a little bit more contrast between the indentation of the imprint and the higher areas. I could have done a dry brush over the top, but it wasn't going to give the look that I wanted. So what I'm going to be showing you is how to control where you do and don't have antiquing gel. Because if I just painted antiquing gel all over the top of this and wiped back, everything on this would get a black tone to it. I've already worked on this piece down here and have it complete. And I'm going to show you how I control where the antiquing gel is and how much I have on it. And requires using small brushes instead of a large swiping motion with it. I'll still be doing some rubbing back. I have a wet, damp. I couldn't squeeze water out of this, but it's good and damp. Paper towel ready to help me do some adjustments. I've got a very, very tiny brush, and I've got about a 1/4 inch flat, just not expensive art brush, but an art brush. And this is what I'm going to be using to put this on with. The first areas I'm going to start on are all of these grooves, but even with the grooves, these straight across grooves, I'm going to work in sections. That's going to allow me to control all of the antiquing gel coming up to the same depth over most of this when I blot it back. I don't want any on these main pieces. I don't want any on the main face of the lion so that he hops out. You can't go up and down in the grooves because you just brush the antiquing gel out. It doesn't take very long to do this, but it definitely impacts how this is going to look. You'll see me going over the leaves as well in a minute, but I'm going into all the groove area that I want to do first because I need that to set just a little bit before I wipe back. Or because these grooves are so, they're not really deep, I would just lift out all of the antiquing gel that I'm putting on here. You can't do the whole thing and then wipe back, not with the way that I'm doing this. You'll get really heavy areas, light areas, and you'll be scrubbing too heavy on a uncured surface. Now I'm going to use the little tiny brush to go into the grooves on these leaves. The antiquing gel was stirred off camera. Don't ever just open it and use it. Hopefully you can see I'm not rubbing across the parts where I don't want the antiquing gel. And I'm not rubbing this way because that will pull all of the antiquing gel out of the grooves. I'm going to go lightly over the leaves. because I don't want to pull that out. And start working on the next section. Wipe the areas you applied it to first, not the last areas that you were working on. And while that's setting a little bit more, I'm going to use the cloth to hit the high points without pulling it out of the bottom to get a little bit more of the gel off of the previous areas. There's some up on that part that I don't want it. So right now, before it's drying. I'm going to take it off. Same thing on this piece, because I don't want those portions blackened. And it's not a light swipe to get that antiquing gel off of those areas. You have to put some pressure in it or it just doesn't come off. You might ask, why can't I just get all of this on here and wipe it off after it's on there and it's all gone? But if you can see, like right here, there's still a film of it on there. It's still impacted the color, and I don't want that on all of it. If I applied it to all of it, I would never get these center pieces back this bright and clear with the stain. And I'm using the damp cloth to adjust how much is left in these grooves. Get a little bit more off the top, but I don't want to have it on there. I'm using my fingertip in here to grab this, so I'm not smearing it onto everything else. My brush is not heavily loaded. I'm barely dipping into the antiquing gel and getting more as needed. Blot first, don't rub. When you're doing a piece like this one, then you can rub where you've already filled in. There's a couple of places here that have black that I don't want to have black. Because my cloth is not sopping wet, it's just good and damp, I can wipe off and leave my highlights in the grooves. That I'm going to get just a little bit wetter to see if I can get a little more of that off. But again, it's not so wet that it's going to run water down into this. looks done to me. I'll see when it sets up to see if there's any place else that I need to rub anything off, because it's really hard in this light. But you can see how it changes the back of that to help bring out details.